Okay, hi. First, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Katie Goldsmith, and I'm a member of the Jewish Federation's newly revamped Entertainment Media Division and Communications Network, formerly known as the Entertainment Division. This is a rebrand of sorts and was meant to reflect a shift in focus from solely traditional entertainment to now include technology and communications. This aligns not only with the broader shift we're seeing in the industry, but it also aligns with my personal career shift from working in film marketing at Universal to now at Amazon Studios, where I'm lucky enough to be working on one of Greg Berlanti's many new projects. It seems only fitting that our first event of this rebrand is taking place on Zoom, very much reflecting a shift to a digital first world. I was initially planning to host this event at my home in March, and now the thought of having 60 people at my house seems unimaginable. But under the category of Corona's silver linings, we had over 360 people register for this event, far more than we would have ever had in person, in a time when we need connection and community more than ever. I'm grateful to the Jewish Federation for hosting events like this, and to people like Patti Felker and Greg Berlanti, who just this past weekend, the New York Times described as being the hardest working person in show business, and yet somehow he made time for us. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jay and we will get on with the program.
Thanks, Katie, for your leadership and for everything you're doing to move this division forward. I am going to talk briefly, and I'm going to talk about the crises as if it is a four-act play, because the way that I talk about this crisis is a four-act play. The first act is what happened right away, and that was the dramatic impact this crisis, this virus has had on our most vulnerable in our community, making home deliveries almost impossible. Well, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Let me start again. It's a four-act play, and it begins with our most vulnerable. And our call line, which is now getting thousands of calls from people who were not poor before but are poor today. The most vulnerable in our community are the ones directly impacted by what we call Act One. And that's about food insecurity. It's about not having enough resources to pay your bills. And so the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles is addressing Act One with our hotline. Those of you who know anyone who is in need, 323-761-8305, our website, jewishla.org. We have a emergency cash grant program, a interest-free loan program, and we're working with our partner Jewish Family Service to make sure that those who need food, as I was trying to say before, get the food delivered to them, since they're not able to, especially our vulnerable seniors and Holocaust survivors, are unable to get out to pick up food like they have before. That is Act One. Act One is continuing because, as everyone knows, this massive unemployment that's happening in America is creating a new generation of poor, a new generation of vulnerable that we're helping. And when we help people for the first time, it's much more complicated than people who have needed help in the past. They need help navigating the government services available to them, from unemployment to Medicaid. And then we have to be the stopgap, as I said, with our loan programs and our emergency cash grant program. Act Two is what's right around the corner. And everyone knows that it's summer soon. And summer means summer camp. And what we're finding now is so much of the important things the Jewish community offers, especially our young people, are going to be put off. There will not be a normal summer in Los Angeles. And there probably will not be a normal fall and even a normal winter when it comes to Jewish connection and engagement. So our federation is trying to make sure that physical distancing is not social distancing. This is one example of how we can bring people together, as Katie said, to make sure that they feel connected to the Jewish community and Jewish life. Act Three is what happens when we get back into our lives, but before the vaccine. How will we live? How will we congregate? How will we create community? And how will, frankly, our fundraising go when people feel less able to write checks because even our most successful people in this community have been hard hit by this virus and about the economic impact. And then the only act that I really care about is Act 4. And Act 4 is what happens the day after there's a vaccine protocol. What happens? What will we have learned from this crisis? And what kinds of pieces are we going to have to pick up to make this Jewish community whole again? I want to assure you the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles is committed, deeply committed to Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. We're all about building community today during this extraordinary event, but we're building community every day. The Jewish Federation has done this work 365 days a year, so we were prepared for this crisis. But what comes ahead, what is in front of us, we're going to need everybody's support to get us forward. This is a community crisis, and we're going to need a community effort to move this community forward after these dark days are past, when we go from lightness, from the dark. It's now my pleasure to turn over the program to Greg Berlanti and Patti Felker. Patti, thank you as always for your support and help. And thank you, Greg, as well.
Okay, so, oh, there you are.
Right.
Wasn't sure this was going to work, but now it seems to be fine. So I want to put everybody's minds at ease. Both of us are wearing pants. I want to start with that so that nobody has to spend time wondering. All right, so Greg, when I first brought your name up to the Jewish Federation, they're like, is he Jewish? And I'm like, kinda. So let's sort of explain how this journey started. The first time I knew you knew anything about Judaism,
Right.
I read the Everwood script, and all of a sudden they're performing Kaddish. And I'm like, how'd that happen?
Well, I grew up in I grew up not so far from where you grew up in Rockland County, New York, until I was about 10, and then we moved to Westchester County. And our community was Jewish and Italian, pretty much. And I'm not sure I knew that I was one or the other before I was 9 or 10 years old. So I was fairly familiar with the faith. I'm sure there's something we'll talk a little bit about later in terms of the role that you play in our family's life now, personally, in terms of our son, and we can speak about that in a bit. But it was probably the faith next. I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy for 5 years. I'm a recovering Catholic, like a lot of people. And I see you're moving to a
yeah, I'm trying to get less
glare. That's good. Less backlight. Very good. Anyway, so I was always very enthralled and comfortable around the Jewish religion, and it was something that was I probably would even say sort of was calling to me as a kid.
So I remember that you were really surprised when you were doing Everwood about the amount and the type of hate mail that you got. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that in a long time, but it was, we chose, obviously I chose to make the hero family of the show, one of a Jewish faith. And then, we chose to dramatize that in a lot of ways. And this was back when there was regular mail, and you would get fan mail in boxes once a month, as opposed to, watching your show get torn to shreds or celebrated every second on Twitter. So we would get, I was surprised by the amount of vitriol then, and it moved me to speak to you about it and to ask you what I could be doing to, other than, choosing to show characters in that light, and also of Jewish faith, what could I be doing in a practical way to help, because it was that was really disheartening to me to see.
So do you find that there's despite how many Jewish writers there are, do you find that there's a dearth of Jewish characters on screen?
There definitely is, and I'm hopeful now that particularly now that there's just more programming in general, that more people You know, but I mean, I think like many marginalized communities, there's just an underrepresentation, and there was for a really long time. And I think what we're starting to see now, in the last, you know, couple of years, particularly, is just the audience kind of revolt. And then also combined with the young storytellers coming up who are just really emboldened to share their story and to share pieces of their life in a way that I think is ultimately, from an economic point, is just great, you know, for the audience who's desirous to see something new, but also is just from a therapeutic point and from the power of the pulpit perspective in terms of, you know, if you really think about it, more than any other moment in history, the stories that we get to tell have a farther reach and have a greater impact than ever before. And so why not choose to tell stories that are going to, you know, hopefully move the world in a better direction?
So I know you also recently visited Israel.
I did, for the first time.
So can you talk a little bit about your experience and what you did there?
We did everything. We did the whole, I went to a TV conference and I brought my husband, and we had a really profound experience. We saw all the sites, both the religious sites and just the cultural sites. And we spent a number of days there and took a tour of the country, and you know, and it was everything I hoped it would be and more. And we can't wait to take our kids.
So let's talk about your kids, because you made a very conscious decision.
I did.
About raising your children to be Jewish.
You're going right to the real personal stuff here. So
well, because it helps frame,
of course,
your work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. So I'm an openly gay man, and you know, been gay obviously, you know, since I can remember, having feelings, intimate feelings for another person, and had a journey to coming out in my early 20s, and it took me a while, but in my you know, by my early 40s, I fell in love with someone that I wanted to marry, and even prior to that, we were, you know, I was already on the path to having a child. And I knew that I wanted the child to grow up with a sense of faith, but that I had felt very alone in my Catholic faith growing up, and I had was at great odds with it. And so we made the conscious choice to raise our children Jewish, and to that end, we sought out a Jewish egg donor. Not the easiest thing in the world to find.
I believe that.
By the way.
And I was not available. I just want to be very clear. I had passed that age of availability.
and so we had a Jewish egg donor, and you know, and we asked you to be our children's godparent, and we've got many other friends who are Jewish, and have been very helpful to us, and we've made even more. And our son is 4 now. Our daughter is turning 1 in 2 days. And it's been, so far, my son thinks that I am Jewish. And there's nothing, anything anyone can say, including my husband, that will dissuade him of like believing this. He just believes it. So at some point I'm going to probably have to make that transition, but he just assumes that I am, and delights in going around and making fun of his other father and saying, ha, you're not Jewish, but daddy are Jewish, and dad is Jewish. And so, and yeah, so we've been, it's been everything sort of we hoped we could be, you know, and there's obviously more specific reasons why we chose that faith. It was the faith that I think probably I in particular was the most comfortable with beyond our faith, but there were a lot of tenets of the religion and, you know, of the faith as I've explored it personally through the years, and now my husband, that made us really, excited.
And your kids go to Jewish day school?
They do. Our oldest does. Our youngest is not.
Well, she's 1.
Yeah, but she goes to but she goes to parent and me classes at 1.
And it is adorable. We do the Jewish holidays together. He knows his 4 questions. He's fantastic.
Yes, and Shabbat, we do all the stuff.
Absolutely. So here's my question.
Right. You're
this great dad, and you have like what, 100 shows on the air or in development. How do you manage it all?
Obviously that's a question that I get asked a lot just by virtue of the number of things that we're working on. And the reality is, it's just by the people that I work with. I mean, both at our company, my partner there is Sarah Schechter, who you also know very well. She's a force to be reckoned with and is brilliant and awesome and helps generate a lot of this material. And then, all of the showrunners that we work with, honestly, it's just a matter of, we sort of built it from the ground up, and it's a lot of relationships with people that we trust and want to support and are there for us, and we try to be there for, and it sort of just grew. It's really just grown out of that. We follow our mantra, if we have one, is we just sort of try and either find a person and or an idea that we're incredibly passionate about. At best, it's both. It's a marriage of the two things. And out of that has grown a lot of amazing opportunities.
So you're really, really well known for all your DC stuff.
Yes.
And YA. But when you're looking, what is it? Are there other kinds of stories that you're just dying to tell that you haven't had the chance to tell yet?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up loving movies and shows across the board that were all sorts of different genres, and I think that's been one of the exciting things for me in the course of my career. When I started out, I'd done a lot of teen soaps, and I was sort of categorized that way, and it was really hard for me to get my first job in the superhero space, as you know. And then at one time we were just family drama. I was seen as just a family drama person, and then we do something like the show that's on Netflix, and that's obviously a thriller and is wicked and sinister in other ways, and so it's all storytelling to me, and I look for just characters and things that excite me are things I haven't gotten a chance to necessarily explore, and I usually like to do those with a partner I can learn from along the way. And so, I've been really blessed in that way too, is that, I sort of seek out someone that may be more gifted in that arena. And then I feel like the tenets of storytelling are just the basics of storytelling kind of apply to almost any story you're trying to tell, in terms of how much are you thinking about the audience, and how can you pull the audience forward and make things as interesting and as exciting as possible.
So when you're going to do a remake, like Little Shop of Horror,
yes,
how do you add a new twist to it to make it different from ones people have seen?
Well, I think a lot of the joy of been working on that for about a year and a half. I've always loved musicals. Musicals is a great example of one that I've been wanting to do for a while. I probably loved them before and as much as I loved a comic book when I was a kid. So. If there's a cross section of people who love musicals and comic books, I was sort of that musical nerd. And so I think the desire is I think that there's a lot about the movie that's always been incredibly relevant, which is why you see it being even redone in New York now and elsewhere. But there are without a doubt just technological advances that have been made that I think give it a reason to sort of explore and to do it again, and in a way that can really open up the audience's mind to and heart, hopefully, to what the fulsomeness of what the show I think could be. So,
have you been thinking about how to handle the new world of COVID with all these productions?
Yeah, I think we're asking, at a studio and a production level, we're asking all the same questions everyone is right now. And, and obviously with the mind of safety first, what will a safe set be? And thankfully, there's going to be a lot of people and voices involved in that conversation. And there'll be, the unions I know are having lengthy conversations right now, and people at every level, and health officials, and everyone sort of chiming in until there's really a set of rules as to what that is. And then we hope to, in preparation for it, it's just generating as many scripts as we can now, being mindful of what some of the restrictions might end up being, and it's going to take more time and more money, and to provide the safest atmosphere, but that's still being very mindful of what's a great episode, or what's a great film for an audience, and not restricting ourselves so much, that the story becomes uneventful.
So have you found that because you are literally producing all over the country and then internationally. Are you finding that you're getting different rules and at each of the places that you're working at?
Not yet. I mean, I think obviously, you hear things as a producer in terms of like what countries in general might be ready to go back before. I mean, I think obviously testing is at the core of all that. How far along is testing and how available is it going to be? And because that's the way to ensure, I would imagine, a safe working environment. And so everyone's just trying to, I think, gather the right questions right now. And there's a lot of people really far above me having a lot of conversations and to try and do the safest thing, but also right after that, to get things back up on their feet again, and not for economics of the business as much as truly the lives of all of these people that work on these shows.
Because I would imagine it's easier to quarantine on a movie together,
right?
Because it's such a smaller specific time than it is for a series which goes 22 or 24 episodes.
Correct. I mean, if that ends up being if that ends up being the safest and best way to do it, I don't know that that's all been determined yet, and how safe are those quarantine conditions. And, I think that you have to approach it from, what would you send your own child to?
Right. I agree.
So I think, we're just like any other business, asking all those questions right now.
I'm just looking here at some of the questions that were submitted. What's the biggest career obstacle you had to face and overcome?
I was at a studio. I was at Warner Brothers, and then I left Warner Brothers and to go someplace else, as you know. And it wasn't I was there for a couple of years, and it wasn't a great fit for me, somewhat personally, but also just the nature of how they really told stories. And I was in a 5-year deal, and you at your suggestion and my agent's suggestion at the time, I asked to be let out of it, and had to give back a lot of the money and then go back to Warner Brothers that I had sort of left in my youth, and their kindness and support of me at that time, Peter Roth on down, everyone there, Susan Rovner and Brett Paul, and everyone just welcoming me home was really lifted my spirits. And there was reason, given my lack of success there and at the previous studio, to believe that we wouldn't be fruitful when I came back, and they never believed that. They always believed that we would have even more success, and they were even more supportive of me. So I was obviously really grateful for that. But that was I have a friend who always says the business is like musical chairs, and there's years you don't get a chair, and you can sometimes have a couple of years in a row like that. And I had a few years in a row where things were just didn't work. Things weren't working out. And the people that supported me during that time, yourself chief amongst them, were essential to me getting through that time and getting to this time.
And now you have like 12 seats at the table, so it's all good.
And now I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunities we have now, because I definitely experienced a downturn.
Let's see. What type of Jewish-themed stories you think are missing from the current marketplace? Because there's Unorthodox came out. I don't know if you've seen Unorthodox.
I love the pilot. I saw just about a week ago. I was able to see the first episode, and I can't wait to watch the rest. It's beautifully done. It's incredibly well done, and the performances are amazing. I think there's so many walks of life. I mean, as diverse as there are Jewish people, you know, and that's the. I think that's always the best answer to whenever I'm talking about it in terms of LGBTQ issues. I go in, and there was a phase where there actually started to be more, LGBTQ characters on television, and in particular, they're still not in mainstream movies really. There's a real dearth of those characters in films, as there are Jewish characters in mainstream films. And so there was this sort of a kind of a lax kind of attitude of like, oh, you would get this in pitches. We still experience this in pitches. where people are like, oh no, we have our gay show. They won't say it in those words.
Right.
But I think that happens with a lot of minorities, and that's, it's unwise and it's unfair. And so you have to push against it. But, it's also up to the passion of the storyteller to believe in their stories before anybody else does, and to find like-minded people who believe in them so that they can change that culture, and it sounds so easy and so simple, but the fact is, like so many businesses, especially I would imagine what's going to happen after this all lifts and things kind of go back to normal, there'll be a sense of like, well, let's just do what we know, and what we know is successful, and then people want to get really safe, and that's not the way at all. I mean, the only way forward is truly to keep doing new, fresh stuff, and to double down on things that are specific. And I think that's really the kind of storytelling that's going to keep drawing people back to wanting to, sign up for a new digital platform, or hopefully go back to the movie theaters.
Okay, so let's see. What do you wish you knew when you were first trying to break into the industry?
I mean, I think that, obviously that maybe I wouldn't have sweated the ups and downs quite as much, and had a little bit more faith that was all sort of part of the story, and that the things, that the obstacles and the hard times and the, is actually when you're learning more about what your own voice is, or what you want to create or push for, or whatever. And so that being said, my younger self would not have listened to me if I could go back. So it's sort of that's where it becomes.
Why should you be like anybody else? Okay, so here's my question. What I think people would find interesting is, what was your first job in the business, and how did you transition to become the writer?
Right. Well, so I'd written since I was a kid. I wrote through college. I wrote plays in college. I came out here with a play, with a desire to be a writer. I'd written some screenplays in college, weren't very good. I started writing, really teaching myself in the first 2-3 years I was out here, reading a lot of scripts that a lot of friends. I got a bunch of really bad temp jobs. I temped all over town. I was a phone operator in the Sherman Oaks Galleria. I taught the SAT, to the girls of Pasadena, who were all competing against each other for the Rose Bowl queen. I was everywhere. And then I became a script typist for Young and the Restless and Bold and the Beautiful. And I would go in at night and type scripts, and then leave there at 2:00 in the morning and go to Jerry's Deli and sit down and write my own stuff. Finally, after about 3 years of doing that, I wrote something that was very, very personal to me. And that became the script that introduced me to you, and Kevin Williamson, who gave me, and Julie Pleck, who I had gone to college with. She was always reading my material and helping me make it better. And she read that script. It became the film, The Broken Hearts Club. And she got that into Kevin. And Kevin said, do you have any other movie ideas? And I pitched him an idea. And that was really the moment that I met you. So I came and sat in your office, and you said, here's how your next couple of years are going to go. And everything you said to me came true. It's one of the only, it really is like a magical moment in my life. I don't know that I've ever experienced anything quite like that before. I'm so grateful for the gods that brought us together at that time. That was sort of how it happened. We pitched that, a film that never got made. And in the process of doing that, Kevin said, do you want to come work on this new TV show I'm doing that's about to air? It's called Dawsons Creek. And I had never thought, really at the time, I hadn't thought much about writing, being a TV writer. I heard you got rewritten a lot. I didn't, quite know how it worked. And it was on my experience on that show, which of course I said yes to, because how could I not, after everything that Kevin and everyone else had done for me. And I went on it. And after about a week, I realized, oh my gosh, I had come from theater. This is so much like the theater. It's writer driven. It's dialogue driven. You're like throwing up a play every week, and I love the vitality of it. And I love the energy of it. I still do. I love the communal nature of it. I still do. And I really felt like I was home. I mean, I remember at the end of that first week calling you, calling my agent, calling my dad, mom, and telling everybody like, oh, I finally figured out like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But it wasn't an exact plan to get there. And over the course of the first year, I just had the time of my life.
Let's see. Okay, who's your favorite superhero?
There's a few Patti questions on there too. There were a few like, how do we work?
People really aren't interested in me.
No.
Almost all these people.
No. There were COVID lawyer questions, and there were left brain, right brain questions.
All right, let's do the left brain, right brain thing. Okay, Greg, you're right brain. By the way, they're assuming that I don't have a creative bone in my body, which, by the way, I don't. But they shouldn't have assumed that. Discuss your relationship, especially when there is a creative difference. Well, let me be really clear.
Right.
I don't make creative choices at all. I am actually completely uninterested in them. So what makes me and Greg an incredible duo is he doesn't really like my job, and I don't really like his job. I don't go visit sets. The one story I tell people is I represent Phil Rosenthal. Everybody Loves Raymond was on for 9 years. He's like, you never come. And I'm like, I have work to do. I don't need to watch you do your work. I'm working for you. He's like, come to the last show. I'm like, okay. So I go to the last show. We're sitting there for an hour and a half. Patty Heaton is sick. And they cancel it. And I'm like, this is an omen. He calls me, he goes, we're going to shoot Sunday. I'm like, I'm not coming on a Sunday to watch you shoot a show. There's no chance in hell. Fine, they cancel that one too. She's sick again. They're going to do it on Tuesday. I'm like, listen, it's very clear. I am not meant to be there. So let's just go. The last one will be like 9 years before it, and I will never show up on a set. And they finally got it done. And I don't think I've ever been on one of your sets either.
No, but we have been to premieres together and premiere parties together, and we've been to Oscar viewing parties together through the years.
Right. And that's all good.
Yes.
Like, I'm happy to see people's end process.
Right.
But like, what I try to explain to people is, I'm not buying your script.
But what might be interesting to people is on the occasion that I've hired a writer of yours or a client of yours and had to work with our business affairs to negotiate against you.
Yes.
That's not fun for me. That is not fun for me. That is what reminds me of how talented you truly are. When like Sarah and I who work with you on one phone call, an hour later are like, she's worn us down. Just give her whatever she wants.
Okay.
I can't have another call with her.
Okay. Here's the good news though. The good news is that at the end of the day, you basically have more shows from Warner's than anybody else. Right. So even though Business Affairs works for Warner's,
right,
like they don't really want to listen to you complain to them, and they don't want to listen to me complain to them.
Right. No one wants to listen to you complain to them.
And somewhere my children are laughing at that. And by the way, someday your children will laugh at you too.
Yes, that's true.
But my point only being is that when we work together, the idea is you talk about the dreams you have creatively, and my job is to help figure out how to get those dreams into a reality business-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we're very good at that.
Yep.
Because I don't advise you in the area that you have expertise on.
Yep.
And more often than not, I have known you for so long, I think 21, 22 years now.
Yes.
That like, I know ideally in a business way what you'd like to have happen. Yeah. So that I can make your style. Like, I honestly believe that when people work for you, you're more generous than most showrunners.
Right.
Like, you have a gratefulness about your life that a lot of people don't have. And so I find that you work with more showrunner level people than others because you're not asking for the last point on a back end. You always want to be fair to people who are working with you, whether they're my clients or anybody else's clients.
Yes.
And I think that people don't understand that that's one of the reasons you're so prolific, because people at the high end know that generosity about you and are willing to have another EP come on because they know that you'll be fair and generous. And I think that's a huge lesson I try to teach other people who are trying to build these big businesses, because it is better to have, as you've told me yourself, it is better to have 20 shows on the air and have X number of dollars on the back end versus one show and have way more points.
Right, and just the opportunity, again, you never want the economics of something to be prohibitive to you working with great people. I just think, you, and yeah, I mean, you would want them to hopefully do, and all of those dynamics that I'm navigating with people, with you, with other people, that's the beginning of a relationship with someone. And,
right.
And if, hopefully a fruitful one, and if you're beginning a relationship with a business person in a business that way by pretending like, oh, I don't know what's going on with my deal, or, not being afraid to, say, hey, look, in success, it should be success for everybody. Then why should they trust you to build something with them? To me, it's as valuable. That dynamic is as important as the creative dynamic you're having with them when you're breaking a story. And so, I think a lot of times people don't want to talk about that stuff, or they don't want to whatever. And, and it doesn't mean that you don't want someone like you representing them yourself. That's like, fair,
right,
and is not going to miss anything. And I think you're still giving notes on my first deal at Dawsons Creek. Like, I get emails from things I'm like, the deal is done, it's complete. And it's like, that's like giving rewrite notes on a movie after the premiere.
Hey, we're getting a back end on that, buddy. We're getting a back end on that show. But actually, one of the things that I think was most interesting is when you were doing Dawson's and they came to you to executive produce it after 2 years, you really wanted to do your movie.
Yes.
And I do remember your then agent saying they are never going to let him out to do a movie in the middle of a season.
Yes.
But we knew they had to have you run that show.
Right.
And we were able to get you out to shoot the movie simultaneously while you were running the show.
Yes. I think one of the things that's been fun about our dynamic together is you really will say to me at the beginning of a deal that, what basically like what's going to work for you personally or emotionally. And so we've had to make them unique, like I remember really early on, outlines were so important with pilot stages. And I'll write a 300-page script before I outline. I've never been that person. And you're like, okay, I'll put it in the contract, that there were things that, and outs to do other things, the capacity, the freedom was always really important to me. Because I want to know, even if I'm obviously really responsible to the thing I'm working on, that if a story comes in that I'm really excited by, I'll get an opportunity.
Okay, so I hear the dinging. What are the dinging? Are those questions?
Yeah. No, the dinging is a family thing that I'm not technologically proficient enough to turn that off on my computer. So I have it off on my phone, but there's like, I have a big.
Okay, so I see this question. In light of everything happening, is your production company looking into animation?
We had already been talking about it, and we will talk about it. I don't know that we've really had our hands full with, just I think addressing the shows that we do have and making sure that that everything that we talked about earlier is happening. So we haven't had as much time to dedicate to it, but we're definitely as intrigued as ever by it.
Okay, here's another one. What advice would you give to someone pitching a new television series?
I think the most valuable advice I always try to remember in this business that, is that your story, your personal experience, whether you're an actor, whether you're a writer, any creative type, is to always get to know what your voice is and do the work and double down on that. Because when you bring that into a room, that kind of specificity, whether again, it's as a performer or whether it's as a writer, that confidence about who you are and what your voice is something that's, in very short supply in this business. And anyone someone like myself or anybody that's good at identifying that or excited by that is going to really help pave a pathway for you to succeed and tell your stories, because it's an invaluable commodity is a true artistic voice.
So somebody had an interesting Jewish question, which is, technically, Robbie and you are not Jewish yet, for sure. And so their question was, are you going to celebrate both holidays? How does that work for your family? Because clearly Robbie's and you have had Christmas for years.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, bless her soul, is no longer with us, who was the other greatest influence on my life. Was her one request was, you're still having a tree and I'm still bringing them Christmas gifts, and then you can do whatever else you want and I'll be supportive of it. And as you know, she was there at the bris and with you, and delighted in our, that we were just passionately exploring a faith for our child. But yeah, we still have Christmas, and we don't do the other holidays.
But we have a wonderful Hanukkah Christmas dinner every year.
Exactly. Yeah, so we have a group of friends that celebrate both, that we started a couple of years ago, and we throw it every year, and we have everyone come, and obviously there's a lot more even important holidays than that in the Jewish faith, and those are equally exciting. And Caleb just loves them. He loves them.
I know, we were so sad because of this. We couldn't do Passover this year.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But we've done virtual things, and and he's just so delights in the stories, and he delights in the whole way of it. So it feels like so far it's been a success, until he realizes that giving it up would really get to me, and does chooses to do that as a source of revenge at some point in his life. Right now,
welcome to parenthood. I always figured, my theory was, give them something I don't really care about, but pretend I do, so they can revolt against that.
Yes.
Like, they're going to revolt against something. Find something you don't really care about, but pretend you do.
Right. Smart.
Hold on. Let's see. Which of your works are you most proud of, and why?
I mean, I hate to, I hate when I feels like I'm like avoiding on this kind of thing, but there are so many different ones that mean something to me for different reasons because of what I learned. Sometimes it's just how to run a show. Sometimes it was, how to actually listen to that voice inside my head. Sometimes it was to protect somebody else and to help them get a show on the air, their first show on the air. Sometimes it was, but I think the ones that are the most resonant with me tend to be the ones that that just come from that place. In the last couple of years, directing Love, Simon was not a writing experience, but was one that really just reminded me of all the things I love about the business, and how joyful I am to be a part of it.
So how similar was that to your personal experience?
I mean, I definitely from the beginning that I read it, I really identified with just keeping that kind of secret inside, and I felt strongly that there was still as liberal as and open-minded as so much of our culture's become in certain regards and in certain locations, that there was really a need throughout the country in particular to tell a story like that, and for kids to get to go to a movie theater and have an experience that I didn't get to have, that was probably the most rewarding element about making the movie.
I remember crying when I saw that premiere. I was like, it was such a touching story about anybody who has to go through any secret in life that they have to share, and that somebody else spills for them.
Yeah, I know.
It was amazing. Okay, let's see. Would you ever consider producing kids programming for like 2 to 11, now that you have little kids? Would you ever produce for kids?
Absolutely. That's another area I feel like there's not a lot of content that, for me to like read my kid a bedtime story that, I have to order it specially from Amazon, usually from like a specialty, publishing house. And there's still not a lot of content that, I mean, it's still, sometimes I'll read him a story, and if it's two, it's a mommy hippo and a daddy hippo, I'm like making it two daddy hippos, because you can't really tell, man. It's not like,
At least I can't.
So I find myself doing that a lot. We fell in love together, he a little bit before me, with the show called Steven Universe. That is just, I recommend it to everybody. I mean, it's been such a gift to me to be able to talk to him about gender and identity in a way that's not so, it's just the way that his mind experiences stories. And it's just, it just reinforces all the values that we've been trying to teach him in that regard.
So I actually think you do this amazing thing with him, which I wish I had known or thought of when I had children, to help with creativity. And I honestly believe Caleb will follow your path because of this, which is you play this game where you do a story, and then you say, what happens next?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And I think that it's been an amazing, because you start it, and then you ask him what happens next, and then he asks you.
Yes.
And I think that training your child to think in that way is amazing.
He's so creative. I mean, it's a little troublesome when we go to school, because he loves he loves horror things and scary things. And so we're always trying to find what's the line. Nothing seems to scare him. I don't know who he got it from. Although Robbie likes the horror movies, but we can't, obviously he wasn't discussing it with Caleb, but he loves to be scared. So, and so we ventured into some scarier subject matter, and, we go in for parent teacher conferences, and they're like, so we think we've pretty much we've done contact tracing, basically, to determine that it's your child, that when your kid's not in school, they don't talk about zombies and anyway, so that's, it's fun, but it's his imagination is really wild.
Yeah, unfortunately, when my younger son, because he had an older brother, he also shared very novel things with his class. Unfortunately, not just creative zombies. Right. Okay, let's just see. I don't think we have tons of time left, so let's just see if there's something particularly how has your experience working with streaming services differed with the traditional networks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the exciting thing about them from a storyteller's point of view, forgetting for a second about how much money you may have to produce something, which is obviously nice, but really from just a narrative point of view is just think about how, as an audience, we watch them, which is not like we watch regular broadcasting. There's not commercials, but there's also, you can watch 1.5. You can watch, it's almost like reading a novel. And that allows for the storytelling, for you to create stories in a totally different direction, sideways and upways and downways, because it's not just about keeping people in their seats until through the next commercial break, which is which is obviously has an impact on how you tell stories. And so streaming, more than anything for me, has really made the art of storytelling the key driver, and not, the ad breaks, or having something exciting or false have to happen. And it allows for stories to be more authentic and interesting.
Can you talk about any of the movies that you have coming on HBO Max yet, or you can't talk about them now?
I'm not sure how much we can. We had one that we did complete that, called Unpregnant, which is, it's been out there, that part. So it's about two young girls traveling across the country to get one of the girls who's still in high school a legal abortion. And so, and it turned out wonderfully, and the director's amazing, Rachel Goldberg, and she's got Valley Girl out right now. You can download it. She's incredibly talented, and yeah, we couldn't be more proud of it. We can't wait till people get to see it.
All right, let's go to let's see, one more. How's it? Are you looking for new projects with female leads?
I mean, I would say most of the stuff we're doing right now probably has female leads. I haven't gone back to take a look, but that's my instinct, just based on, you know, that's yes.
So here, this was actually one of my favorite questions. If you could reboot anything, if you could besides Little Shop of Horrors,
right,
what would be your dream to either reboot as a series or remake as a feature?
You know, and not necessarily get to do myself. Like, I mean, I think that the thing is, I think when I think about that question, I think, what would I want to see as an audience person, not necessarily what do I think is kind of lurking out there to do.
Right.
I mean, this is so off from what everything else we've talked about, and more in line with the stuff that we've discussed. But when I was a kid, I loved the show Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. And I
by the way, I remember that show.
No access to that. Gil Gerard, you know, and so, but I just, you know, having a space adventure serial like on television like that when I was a kid just was so exciting for me. And so, you know, I have, again, that's not in the Warner's, toolbox. Library, right? Yeah. So but that's the kind of thing that I, you know, would love to be able to watch with my kid right now.
Now you work with Robbie on some stuff. How's that?
That's been as amazing as every other part of our relationship, and he, it's been really successful because he's such a hard worker and so passionate. He came out of the world of sports. He was a professional athlete, and as many people may know. And, you know, he brought us the show that became All-American. He said, I have a friend. He's got an amazing story. And he watched, obviously, what I was doing and what other people at our company were doing. And he really doubled down. And, you know, he's beloved by actors and writers and the people who work with him for all the reasons that I fell in love with him. He's smart and he's caring. And he gets, I think, what's the most important thing a producer can provide anybody, and I think anyone in the business can provide someone else, and that's belief and advocacy. I think that is the most people that haven't just generated their own success have gotten successful by believing in somebody else and supporting that person. And I think that's, you know, I think that is, he is brilliant at that part and other parts.
So Katie keeps sending us little texts. So Katie, where are we and what do you need?
How are we doing?
How's our timing? Is Katie, you there?
Oh,
hi.
There's another Katie. I'm not the one sending texts. But I think we are at time. So just a massive thank you to Greg and to Patti and to everyone who tuned in today. If anyone would like more information about how to get involved, you can go to jewishla.org. And I think that's all we have from everyone. Thank you so much.
All right.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.